All right, let's kick off. Thanks. So as I mentioned, we had chapter 1 of our state and cross-border series released back in May. We will make sure that the link to all that data is available to everyone as we go through the webinar today. You can also find it on our website. That was deeply focused on consumer insights, growth by market, growth by SKU by market, and then how we are seeing tariffs impact global e-commerce around the world. Today, we're going to talk, as Rochelle mentioned, about all the things we're seeing around customs and tariffs specifically. And then, as I previewed, please join us in a month for chapter 3, which will go deep on the actual shipping part of how global trade is been working in the first half of this year. So coming soon, next chapter. We're very lucky here at FlavorCloud. We are accumulation of all of our merchants' shipments and orders. So we have over 100 million in GMV and shipments on the platform that comprises this data, 500 plus e-commerce brands, and over 80 data points that we pull from our aggregate data set to bring these insights to you today. So that is the source of our data. And then if you zoom out on the report, for which I think we've just shared, I think there's some headline findings we just wanted to get out in front quickly. Number one, of no surprise to anyone, we've lived this together, we're still living this together, that the tariff regulatory environment is structurally shifting, right? So we have seen really since January, new tariffs being born, taken away, sometimes reborn, sometimes adjusted. That's really influencing and affecting global commerce that we're gonna go deep on. Secondly, customs is taking an advantage of these new regulations and obviously enforcing them in new and more stringent ways than they have in the past. So there's an acceleration of enforcement to candidly collect the tariff revenue that is being deployed. Country of origin. So a lot of us refer to this as made in. So where a good is made is technically called the country of origin, but it's really important to say made in because as we know, tariffs apply to those goods based on their country of origin made in, not where they're shipped from. So those are very, very different things. You could have a made in China SKU coming into the United States from Canada, shipped out of Canada, and it's still going to incur the tariffs. So that's just one example of how country of origin in this volatile tariff environment is actually affecting both supply and demand of global commerce. So we'll go deep on that. We are also seeing in our findings the need to mitigate a single source of manufacturing. So we can see this clearly because tariffs today are being levied against many of the highest volume manufacturer sourcing countries. And so it's important to diversify and de-risk your basket of sourcing so that you can build some immunity and some resilience around where these tariffs are most acutely being deployed against. And then lastly, we are seeing significant changes in where merchants choose to place their inventory and house their inventory. So we're seeing supply chains becoming really regional. So if sourcing somewhere in Asia, a regional supply chain looks like inventory moves right to the EU. So China to the EU, China to Canada, thus bypassing a lot of the volatility we are seeing in the United States. So much more diversification and regionalization of where inventory lives to mitigate the unknown and volatile tariffs. All right, let's, before we go further into the data and the findings in chapter 2, I thought it might be worth it to zoom out just for a second and do a quick pulse check on where the global e-commerce market is today. So Rochelle, thank you. We'll go to the next slide. So Shopify reported Q1 2025 earnings, and in that they saw a 31% increase in international GMV across all of their merchants. That's great. At FlavorCloud, we have seen year-over-year merchant order growth at 76%. And again, gentle reminder here at FlavorCloud, we power cross-border only commerce. So this is a cross-border only lens. And then of note, some of the fastest growing e-commerce markets we've seen is UAE at almost 200% year-over-year growth, New Zealand at 131, and Singapore almost at 100% year-over-year growth. So those are some of the standouts that we've seen from our merchants. All right. Thank you. Ratna.
Yeah. So getting into some of the actual implications for tariffs, we want to kind of look at what is happening around the world. So today we're focused on a US lens, but essentially what's happening around the world is that borders are becoming less porous. There is significant change. We saw that with Brexit. And then with the EU, iOS changes, but really around the world, there's tariff implications that are happening because of protectionism, because of the ability to control what comes into the country in terms of border security, as well as eliminating cheap goods from coming into the country and creating efficiencies for domestic businesses. And finally, everybody wants a piece of the tax revenue. As e-commerce grows, we're seeing a fundamental shift in this direction. So it's much more about tariffs are here to stay. These types of changes that we see globally are going to be more frequent. And it's much more about being ready for these changes and being more agile and being able to adapt quickly to these changes. So that's what we're going to really recommend to brands, but also just in general, relying on partners that can help mitigate margin implications or supply chain implications is the key.
I think what's really interesting here, Ratna, is most people kind of have paid attention or woken up to this tariff world here in H1 2025. And I think what's really critical in the slide to take away is, no, this has been building for years. And more than half of the build is coming from three countries, the US, China, and the EU. So it's
yeah,
really
absolutely. And I think when you look at it, this doesn't even have 2025. It is going to look drastically different. And obviously, the US has been leading that charge and causing significant implications and reciprocal tariffs as well. So we'll see more of that going into next year.
perfect. So before we do get to 2025, which is the next slide, let's look at 2020 to 2024. So for the past 4 years alone, all the protectionism, penalties plus liquidation has driven 22% more revenue to the Border Protection Services. The number one reason by far, almost 75% of the drivers of penalties or liquidation have been because the commercial invoice has had a value of the goods that was lower than it should have been. So therefore, the importer paid less tariffs or import duties based on that lower valuation. So we have been seeing, over 4 years, more revenue to the tune of 22% more. And most of it's because importers have undervalued the goods and therefore underpaid their duties. So that's been the data through 24. Now let's segue to 2025. So what we're seeing in 2025 through May 31st, so this is almost all of H1 2025, is that CBP general tariff revenue is up to $108 billion versus the same period last year at 88, which is, I think, about 23%. So these tariffs are driving in 1/2 of 1 year alone an additional 23% revenue into the US. The largest driver, if you look to the right under the line in bold, almost half of that total volume is the increase on the made in China, country of origin China products coming in.